Are you preparing for the TOEFL test and have no idea how to score 30 out of 30 on the TOEFL reading section? Do you struggle with academic vocabulary or spend too much time answering insert text, prose summary, and sentence simplification questions? Then keep watching this video because we'll cover everything you need to know to get a perfect score on test day. We'll start by going over the structure of the reading test. Then discuss the most relevant and effective tips and tricks to score 26 plus. Go through the most important vocabulary for the reading section. And finally, analyze 5 TOEFL reading passages together. This will make you feel confident and fully prepared for test day. Now, if you have no idea what reading question types exist or how to approach them effectively, sign up for our TOEFL course. We'll teach you how to answer questions quickly and correctly, even if you don't know every word in the passage. I've worked with hundreds of students, both in consultations that are part of the TOEFL course and in private one-on-one sessions. And I can tell you with certainty that your level of English and your final score aren't always directly related. You might understand almost all the words in the text and still make mistakes that lower your score, while someone with more limited vocabulary but the right strategies can answer correctly and score higher. Of course, having an extensive vocabulary helps, but it's not the only factor in TOEFL success. I've seen many students improve their scores from 22 to 25 or from 23 to 26 after just a few sessions where we work on reading passages together. And as someone who scored 119 out of 120, and more importantly, has analyzed countless TOEFL reading texts, and even created many from scratch, I know exactly how this exam works and the nuances of each question type. I understand what the examiners are looking for and how they design these tasks, so I can easily break down their traps and teach you how to avoid them. The link is in the description below. Now, let's get started. Top 10 tips for acing the TOEFL reading section. Let's get started. First, let's look at the structure of the TOEFL reading section. It consists of only 2 passages, each about 700 words long, and you have 10 questions after each passage. You'll have about 35 minutes to complete this section, which means you'll have about 17 minutes for each passage. This brings us to the first tip. Don't read the entire passage. Just dive right into the questions. I know this may seem like an obvious tip, but I often see videos and articles that tell you to read the passage first. There is nothing wrong with that, but you have to be a very fast reader. Otherwise, you will lose time that could have been spent answering the questions. So, start by reading the title of the passage to get the main idea, and then move on to the first question. Look at the example. You have a passage about ancient coastlines. The first question is a vocabulary question. You need to find a synonym for the word crucial. The correct answer is important. As you can see, if you know the word crucial, you will answer this question in a few seconds and move on to question 2. You don't need to read the whole paragraph to find the correct answer. Tip number 2, improve your vocabulary. As you saw in the previous example, knowing the meaning of the word makes things a lot easier. The TOEFL reading section is not only a reading test, it's also a vocabulary test. So, to improve your reading score, you should work on expanding your vocabulary. Not only will this help you answer vocabulary-based questions more effectively, but it will also help you understand passages better. Many students claim to have problems with their reading skills, but after they do a few practice tests, it turns out that their vocabulary is limited. This prevents them from scoring well in the section. For example, if you don't know the word resurgence, you might have a hard time finding the right answer because it's not so easy to guess from the context. However, if you know that resurgence means something begins to grow, develop, or become successful again, and you know synonyms for it, such as renewal, revival, and comeback, you will find answer B in no time. This brings me to tip number 3. Practice active reading. One of the most effective ways to expand your vocabulary, especially when it comes to academic vocabulary, is to read actively. There are 2 types of reading you can do. Passive reading is when you just read something for pleasure. This is usually what we recommend for elementary language learners, because they need to learn to understand the main idea of the text. However, at the advanced level, active reading becomes crucial. You need to underline words you don't know, look up their definitions, write down lists of synonyms, and think of sample sentences with these words to help you remember them. Remember that TOEFL is an academic test, so it's common to receive texts on physics, astronomy, marketing, sociology, music, art, or geology. So the sooner you start doing active reading on these topics, the better. Tip number 4, master skimming, scanning, and close reading. While one part of your success on the TOEFL reading section is a large vocabulary, the second part involves these 3 reading skills. Skimming means moving quickly through a paragraph or a passage without reading every word to get the main idea or structure of the text. This is something we would do when reading news online. Scanning means looking for the right part of the text to read. For example, you have a question about seagrasses. This means that you need to find this word in the paragraph. So, scanning would involve looking for that word, identify the right sentence, and then reading carefully to find the answer. You will need this technique for many types of questions, such as factual information and negative factual information questions. However, the most important reading skill is what we call close reading. Many students forget this and only skim and scan, which often results in low scores. For example, take a look at this type of question. It's called a sentence simplification question. To answer this question, you have to read the given sentence carefully, break it down into several main ideas, understand its meaning, and then find a sentence that has essentially the same meaning. You will never be able to answer it correctly if you just look for the keywords. Tip number 5, focus on keywords and synonyms. It's important to pay close attention to keywords because many question types in the TOEFL reading section require you to identify them. In order to find the correct answers quickly, you need to look for keywords in the questions themselves, in the answer choices, and in the passage. This will also help you save time and get through the questions more quickly. You should also be aware of the importance of synonyms and paraphrases in the TOEFL reading section. Some names, such as seagrass, are unlikely to change, while if your keywords are words like impact, decline, or importance, you should expect their synonyms or paraphrases. Tip number 6, time management. You have a limited amount of time to complete the entire section, so use your time wisely. Don't spend too much time on any one question. If you're not sure, mark it and come back to it later. Unlike the listening section, you can navigate freely between questions in this section. So if you skip a question or two, you can always come back to it later. As you practice, time yourself and see how much time you spend on each question. Tip number 7, guess the meaning of words from context. No matter how good a reader you are or how many words you know, you will always encounter some words that are new to you, and that's okay. The reading section tests your understanding of academic texts and articles, so it's natural that even native speakers won't know all of these words. When you read a text about astrophysics in your native language, you will also see some words you don't know, and that's okay. So don't panic if you don't know some words, or even many of them. Instead, focus on the words you do know and try to guess the meaning of other words from context. Tip number 8, familiarize yourself with the question types. Becoming familiar with the different types of questions will save you time and will also help you approach each question strategically. You will not need to read the instructions for each question, and you can spend this time on finding the right answer. So, after taking a few full-length reading practice tests, go through all the question types and learn the strategies for each one. This is what we teach you in our TOEFL course. We go through the question types, discuss the strategies, and then analyze a complete reading section together so you learn how to apply these strategies on the real TOEFL test. This will help you feel confident on the day of the test. You will also learn the templates for high-scoring answers on the speaking and writing sections, important vocabulary for the listening section, and tips and tricks to improve your timing during the test. The link to the course is below. If you need help with your TOEFL preparation, click and join our TOEFL community. Tip number 9. Practice with a variety of tests. It is obvious that the best practice tests are the official ones you will find on the ETS website. They are created by professionals and are the closest you can get to the real TOEFL test. However, if you have done them all and still need practice tests, you should choose a few different platforms to use in your preparation. Taking tests on only one platform may either make the preparation too easy for you or make the TOEFL test seem too challenging. So be sure to combine different resources to best prepare for the test. Finally, tip number 10. Review and learn from your mistakes. After each practice test, analyze your answers. Understand why you got certain questions wrong and learn from your mistakes. This self-reflection is the key to continuous improvement. If you only take tests, you can take hundreds of them and still make the same mistakes over and over again. I'm going to give you 10 essential tips to help you boost your reading score. The tips I'm going to cover today are more in-depth and are aimed at students who've been struggling with their reading scores for a while. Let's get started. Tip number 1. Improve your reading speed. One of the most important skills for the TOEFL reading section is the ability to read quickly, while still understanding the content. You won't have time to read each passage in detail, so focus on improving your reading speed without losing comprehension. You can take a free speed reading test on the Outread website. Simply click the Start button, read the text, and then click the Done Reading button. You'll then be asked to answer some comprehension questions about the text. When you're done, you'll see your reading speed and comprehension rate. To improve your reading speed, use the Read Speeder, which is a free speed reading course. It has a combination of quick exercises that can really help you increase your reading speed. Also, just reading a lot really helps. If you have to read 200 pages a day for your university assignments, you'll develop speed reading really fast. I know many students who've developed their reading speed by devouring their favorite books every day. Tip number 2, attempt every question. Don't skip questions without at least trying to answer them. Even if you're unsure, try to eliminate the wrong options and make an educated guess. The TOEFL doesn't penalize you for incorrect answers, so there is no harm in guessing. You should also keep in mind that the questions on the TOEFL are always presented in a specific order. This order makes it easier for you to answer each question. There is a little life hack that I always like to teach my students. If you have 2 questions for the same paragraph, the first question usually refers to the first part of the paragraph, while the second question refers to the second part of the paragraph. So knowing which part of the paragraph you used to answer the first question will always help you figure out where to look for the answer to the next question. For example, let's take a look at this question. It's a factual information question. To answer it, you need to read the first 2 sentences of the paragraph. Then comes the negative factual information question, which also refers to the same paragraph. That means that I will most likely not need the information from the first 2 sentences and should focus on the part that starts with "in the 15th century." Also, the information you get from answering some questions can be really useful in the questions that come next. For example, let's say I answered the inference question about the Venetian Council's decision to use round ships. To answer this question, I'll need to read the entire paragraph and focus on the main ideas. However, the next question is a factual information question based on the same paragraph, so I don't need to read it again. I can find the right answer quickly because I know the text well. Tip number 3. Watch out for extreme or absolute words. Extreme or absolute words such as only, always, never, none, nobody, or all can be red flags in answer choices. Such words make the statement very rigid, and in most cases, answers containing such words will be incorrect. So whenever you see them, be careful, because they may not fit with the nuanced information in the passage. For example, let's look at this negative factual information question. It refers to 2 paragraphs, which means you always have to find some information in one paragraph and some in the other. I also see that one of the answer choices contains the word only, which makes me think that's probably the right answer. Remember, for this type of question, you should find the answer that's not mentioned. But let's test this theory. How do we approach this question? A student without too much TOEFL reading experience might start by reading both paragraphs. Or they might panic and go back and forth between the options and the text. You can pause the video now and try to answer this question yourself first. The thing is, the previous question addressed the first part of the paragraph, up to the words, as the cost of shipbuilding rose. Now, we just discussed this situation in tip number 2. This means that the second question for the same paragraph covers the part I haven't read yet, which is just the last sentence. So I'll read it first. After reading it, I can immediately eliminate option B. Then, as I'm reading the next paragraph, I learned that the standards and traditions were running down. Also, work was stretched out and done poorly. This means that I can also eliminate options A and C, because I'm looking for the information that is not mentioned in the text. Option D is the only one left. The text mentions merchants, but we don't know if only a few of them were involved. Tip number 4. Learn synonyms and paraphrases. The TOEFL test often uses synonyms and paraphrases in questions and answers to test your understanding of vocabulary and ideas. For example, if a passage uses the verb to increase, the answer might include the phrase to go up. Along with synonyms, TOEFL also likes to use paraphrases. While synonyms focus on replacing individual words, paraphrases rewrite entire sentences or ideas. My advice is to make it a habit to learn the different ways an idea can be expressed. This will help you recognize the meaning even when different words are used. 2 good exercises to build your vocabulary in this respect are: 1. Create lines of synonyms. For example, let's take the verb to increase. You can find such synonyms as go up, rise, expand, boost, grow, escalate, surge, enhance, amplify, heighten, elevate, augment, intensify, skyrocket, and more. And yes, not all of them are exact synonyms of the verb increase. For example, to skyrocket means to increase very rapidly or steeply. But trust me, it's a good enough synonym for the TOEFL reading section. 2. Take pieces of academic texts and try to paraphrase them. Think about how you can express the same ideas in your own words, using synonyms and different paraphrasing techniques. For example, you can use a different word form. Include, including. Change the word order. Change the active voice to the passive voice, and vice versa, and so on. This is a great exercise. If you do it for at least 3 or 4 minutes every day, paraphrasing on the TOEFL will quickly become a piece of cake. Tip number 5. Extract important information and skip extra details. For questions like inference, it's important to focus on the critical information and not get distracted by unnecessary details. For example, when you see information enclosed in commas or parentheses, it's often supplementary and not critical to the main idea. Train yourself to quickly identify what is important in the text, especially for questions that require you to draw conclusions from the information provided. Let's look at the inference question we just discussed. To answer this question, I'll need to quickly go through the paragraph, focusing only on the main ideas. For example, I can see that the Venetian Council finally allowed round ships to enter the trade. This reduced transport costs. As a result, The prices of spices came to equal those transported by Portuguese vessels. There is a typo in the word Portuguese here, by the way. The increase in quantity drove the price far down, and gradually, Venice's role decayed and it lost its monopoly. So the correct answer is B. Ultimately, it did not restore the superiority in the spice trade that Venice had enjoyed earlier. As you can see, I'm focusing only on the main ideas of this paragraph, ignoring the extra details. Tip number 6. Write down the main idea of each paragraph. As you move from question to question, write a brief summary of the main idea of each paragraph. Don't write a lot. A few words will suffice. For example, you've answered the first 2 questions for the same paragraph, and you see that the third question is about the next paragraph. Before you get to it, write down, for example, 1. Ways to find row words. This strategy helps you to stay focused and track the passage's structure. It will also make it much easier to answer the final prose summary question. Also, by having a clear sense of what each paragraph is about, you can quickly refer back to the passage when needed. Tip number 7. Understand signal words. Signal words such as however, in contrast, for example, and therefore show the relationship between ideas in the text. These words act as guides to help you follow the author's reasoning and organization. Paying attention to these words will make it easier to understand the flow of the passage and to answer questions about the structure and purpose of different parts of the text. These words are especially helpful for insert text questions, rhetorical purpose questions, and sentence simplification questions. Tip number 8. Work on prose summary questions independently. The prose summary question is one of the most challenging questions. It's the last question for each passage, and students usually spend a lot of time on it. This question asks you to summarize the text you've read in 3 sentences. Each sentence should convey the main idea of the text. I often see people who spend 5, 6, or even 7 minutes on this type of question and still cannot find the right answers. So my advice is to do this question first, before any of the other question types. Make sure you only do it when you practice at home. On test day, do this question last as expected. This strategy will allow you to really excel at eliminating the wrong options and choosing the right ones. What I notice is that most students rely too much on the text. Well, the best strategy for this type of question is to learn to choose the right answers without reading the text at all. You may be thinking, how can I answer this question without knowing the text? Actually, it's the lack of the text factor that makes you focus on comparing and contrasting the options given and understanding which of them might be the right answers and which might be eliminated. If you do 10 to 15 questions without reading the text, answering the same question with a good knowledge of the text becomes a piece of cake. I do this a lot with my students, and most of them are skeptical at first. But after a few questions, they start answering correctly and much faster. So trust me, this is an effective strategy. Also, on test day, if you've answered all the previous questions, you already have a good grasp of the main ideas. So again, it's more than enough to finish the prose summary question quickly. As you can see, knowing the question types and nuances of the reading section is a must to succeed on this part of the test. Without it, you can spend hours practicing without much improvement. This is what we teach you in our TOEFL course. We go over the question types in detail, discuss the strategies, and analyze a complete reading section together so that you learn to apply these strategies on the real TOEFL test. This will help you feel confident on test day and get the score you need. You'll also get access to high-scoring templates for your speaking and writing responses, key vocabulary for all parts of the test, and tips and tricks to improve your timing during the test. The link to the course is below. If you need help with your TOEFL preparation, click on it and join our TOEFL community. Tip number 9. Read the questions carefully. This may sound basic, but it's important to read the questions carefully and try to simplify them. The TOEFL reading section includes a variety of question formats, and most of them require you to have a good understanding of what you're looking for in the text. For example, for insert text questions, read the statement carefully before placing it in the correct part of the paragraph. For factual information questions, read the question and rephrase it in your own words. For example, in this question, according to paragraph 2, which of the following contributed to the decline of Venetian shipping? You need to find out why there was a decline in Venetian shipping. For negative factual information questions, always remember to find the statement that isn't true based on the text. Many students get so excited that they find the option given in the text and mark it as the correct answer, which is a mistake. Knowing exactly what the question is asking will prevent you from wasting time on unnecessary details or misinterpreting the questions. Finally, tip number 10. Always eliminate 2 incorrect options first, even if the question seems challenging. Start by crossing out 2 options that are definitely wrong. The TOEFL is not very challenging. In fact, you'll always have 2 options that are 100% wrong. When you eliminate them, you're choosing between the remaining 2 options, which means your chances of picking the right one increase. By following these 10 tips, you'll build stronger reading strategies and be better prepared for the TOEFL reading section. As you've seen, it all comes down to practice, consistency, and learning how to manage your time effectively during the test. If I were asked, what's the most important thing you can do to succeed on the TOEFL? I'd definitely say it's to expand your vocabulary. The more words you know, the easier it will be for you to do well on each section of the test. In the reading and listening sections, knowing more words will help you understand better, which will give you a chance to answer more questions correctly. A large vocabulary will also help you speak more fluently in the speaking section. You won't have to pause to decide which word to use. You'll also be able to get more detail from the text and audio materials for the integrated speaking questions. Finally, I think you'll agree that knowing specialized and advanced vocabulary will also help you in the writing section. Now, the next question is, what words should I learn? Number 1, campus vocabulary. Many lectures and conversations in both the listening and speaking sections deal with the situations that may occur on campus. So, knowing words like academic advisor, prerequisites, dorms, roommate, bunk bed, transcripts, A students, transfer, and elective courses is a must. 2, academic vocabulary. These are words that appear frequently in academic texts. You'll encounter them in the writing and reading sections, and they also appear frequently in the speaking and listening sections of the test. For example, individual, research, consistent, area, regulations, perceived, emphasis, undertake, and so on. By the way, we have created a free PDF with the top 100 words for the TOEFL test you need. So feel free to check it out by clicking the link in the description below. 3. Idiomatic vocabulary. Anything idiomatic refers to expressions that cannot be understood by their literal meaning. A common misconception that many students have is that idiomatic vocabulary is all about using idioms. The truth is that it's highly unlikely that you'll need many idioms on the day of the test. In fact, if your English is idiomatic, it means that you use expressions that are natural and correct. Idiomatic vocabulary really helps in the speaking section. It allows you to convey the same message in a shorter and more natural way. For example, what's the word we use to describe something that really annoys us? We use the word pet peeve. Smoking is one of my pet peeves. I hate it when people smoke around me. Another example is a soft-spoken person. That's the person who has a quiet or gentle voice. Some people have a loud voice, some people have a soft voice, and these people are soft-spoken. Now, the last and most important category is advanced vocabulary. Do you know such words as occur, accumulate, collide, copious, divert, frivolous, and hindrance? All of them are examples of advanced vocabulary. Advanced vocabulary is a game changer on the TOEFL and pretty much every other language test out there. It's extremely helpful in every section of the test. In fact, studying advanced vocabulary is the fastest way to improve your TOEFL score. And that's the kind of vocabulary we'll be working on in today's lesson. Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel, where you can find all the tips and tricks to score high on the TOEFL test. I'm Anastasia, and in the previous video, we discussed linking words to score high on the TOEFL speaking section. In this video, we'll discuss 20 advanced words you must know to succeed on the TOEFL test. If your TOEFL test is approaching and you feel you need more guidance and feedback, you can also take our TOEFL preparation course and have your speaking and writing skills evaluated. Without further ado, let's get started. I suggest we play a game. As you watch this lesson, pause the video every time you see a new word and try to guess its meaning. Put a plus next to the words you got right and a minus next to the words you got wrong. Then count how many of the words you know. If you got them all, write winner in the comments. Otherwise, tell me how many words you got right. The first word is condescending. Listen carefully. Condescending. The Latin prefix con means with, and the Latin word for descend means down. So when someone is described as condescending, it means that they act in a way that makes others feel inferior or looked down upon. For example, imagine a teacher who talks to students as if they're not very smart or important. That's a condescending attitude, and it can make people feel small or unappreciated. So when you're condescending, you're looking down on someone. Let's do a little test. In the reading section, you might get a vocabulary question that looks like this. The manager's condescending tone made the new employees feel unwelcome and discouraged. The word condescending in the sentence is closest in meaning to A, deplorable, B, deceptive, C, haughty, and D, blessed. The correct answer is C, haughty. Write it down. Condescending, haughty, arrogant. They're all synonyms. Now, let's talk about the verb to obtain. To obtain means to get something that is not so easy to have. You can obtain knowledge, information, permission, a license, a document, or a loan. You wouldn't say you obtained a pair of socks unless they were unique. So, it's a verb we use in formal contexts. A small test. To obtain knowledge on the subject, researchers conducted extensive experiments and analyzed the resulting data. The word obtain in this sentence is closest in meaning to A, get, B, accord, C, astonish, D, depend. A is correct. Next is emerge. When something emerges, it means it comes into view or becomes known. Think of a talented musician emerging on the music scene. After years of hard work, their talent finally emerges for all to see. When I think of the word emerge, I immediately think of emerging technologies. All these new types of technologies that are popping up or appearing all the time. Give me some examples of your favorite emerging technologies in the comments. Time for a test. Obviously, C is correct. Appear is the closest synonym for emerge. Now, let's delve into transcendence. This is a fancy word that means going beyond ordinary limits or surpassing expectations. Picture a breathtaking painting or a mesmerizing piece of music that takes you to another world. That's the kind of transcendence we're talking about, where something becomes so extraordinary that it surpasses everything else. Remember the movie Transcendence with Johnny Depp? It's a sci-fi film exploring artificial intelligence. In the movie, Johnny Depp's character, Dr. Will Castor, uploads his consciousness into a computer, which makes him extremely powerful. So we see how he transcends or surpasses human limitations, blurring the line between man and machine. Moving on. Word number 5 is crucial. When something is crucial, it's extremely important or necessary for success. Just like getting enough sleep is crucial to maintaining good health, or studying is crucial to doing well on your exams. How would you answer this question? A is correct. Crucial and essential are two words we use when something is very important. You will see them a lot on the TOEFL reading section, so make sure you have them on your list. Advantageous is our next word. When something is advantageous, it means it's beneficial or helpful. For example, learning a second language can be advantageous for finding job opportunities, making new friends, and experiencing different cultures. I can use it in the writing section. For example, living close to work can be advantageous because it saves time and money on commuting. We'll stop with the tests here, since you pretty much have an idea of what vocabulary questions look like on the TOEFL. However, let me know in the comments if you like the idea of tests. Now, let's talk about the word frivolous. When something is frivolous, it means it's not serious or important. It lacks seriousness. Buying expensive things you don't need instead of saving money for important things like education or emergencies is an example of frivolous spending. If someone is frivolous, they shouldn't be taken seriously because they're always fooling around and never getting anything done. Frivolous is practically the opposite of essential. Spending money on frivolous luxuries instead of saving for the future can lead to financial problems. Our next word is terrestrial. This is one of my favorite words because very few of my students know it. So I like to include it in the matching assignments I create. Terrestrial simply means related to the Earth or its inhabitants. So if it's terrestrial, you'll find it on Earth. If it's extraterrestrial, you'll find it coming from a UFO. We humans are terrestrial creatures, which means we live and thrive on this planet and depend on its resources for our survival. In TOEFL reading, you'll often see texts about terrestrial animals. Terrestrial animals are mammals, birds, and reptiles that live on land. Moving on to mandatory. When something is mandatory, it means it's required by rule or law. It's obligatory. Wearing a seat belt is mandatory for all passengers in a car to ensure everyone's safety. I hear this word a lot in conversations on both the speaking and listening sections of the test. You'll see something like this. It's mandatory for students to attend classes regularly to maintain their enrollment status. Some nice synonyms are compulsory and obligatory. Just recently, I saw the word compulsory on one of the reading tests, so make sure you have it on your list. 10. Outer. This word refers to something that is outside, external. For example, astronauts wear spacesuits to protect themselves from the harsh conditions of outer space. Escalate is our next word. When you see this word, think of an escalator that takes you quickly to the next floor. This word usually has a negative connotation, so it's usually something bad that escalates. For example, prices or conflicts can escalate. Imagine a disagreement between friends that escalates into a heated argument. That's when things get more intense and serious. Example sentence. The conflict between the two companies began to escalate, raising concerns about the possibility of cooperation. 12. Plummet. The verb plummet means to fall sharply, like eagles that plummet toward the earth in search of prey, or school attendance that plummets when there is a flu outbreak. For example, the stock market may plummet after bad news about the company's financial situation is announced. Example sentence: temperatures plummet overnight, causing icy conditions on the roads. Now let's talk about the word adolescent. Simply put, this is just a fancy word for teenager or teen. Someone who is no longer a child, but not yet an adult. Sample sentence: she doesn't understand the emotional problems of adolescence. Let's keep going. What about feudal? When something is feudal, it means it's incapable of producing a useful result. It's pointless. Trying to change someone's mind when they are set in their decision can feel futile, because they are unlikely to budge. You can say, it's futile to argue with him when he is in a bad mood. He won't listen to reason. Again, this is a very common word in the TOEFL reading section. Be prepared to see it a lot. Moving on to impact. This word can be used as either a verb, to impact, or a noun, impact. It refers to the effect or influence of one thing on another. For example, the construction of a new road could have a positive impact on the local economy by creating jobs. Note that when this word is a noun, it's followed by the preposition on. Have a positive impact on the local economy. But as a verb, it doesn't need a preposition. Hearing aids may be able to impact mental health positively. This is one of the synonyms for the verbs to influence and to affect. Indispensable is next. When something is indispensable, it means it's absolutely necessary, essential, something you can't do without. Water, for example, is indispensable to human survival. We can't live without it. Let's review. Crucial, essential, indispensable. All these words mean something is very important. In the writing section, you can include such a sentence in your essay. Good communication skills are indispensable for success in both personal and professional life. Now, let's talk about the word supercilious. Listen carefully. Supercilious. What do you think this word means? It's used to describe someone who acts or looks like they think they're superior to others. Imagine a person who always acts like he or she is better than everyone else. That's a supercilious attitude. Her supercilious attitude made it difficult for her to make friends. A quick vocabulary test for this word. Be careful when answering. Well, they're all right. That was a trap. If you watched the lesson carefully, you remember that a condescending person, like a supercilious person, is someone who acts or behaves as if they are superior to others. Haughty and arrogant are the other two synonyms. So, congratulations! We've learned so many advanced and useful words for the TOEFL test, and only a few remain on our list. 18. Illiterate. This word describes someone who cannot read or write. Unfortunately, there are still many illiterate adults in the world who struggle to access basic information and opportunities. Now, someone who is literate can read or write. Literate, illiterate. 19. Scarcity. This word refers to a lack of something, a shortage. For example, scarcity of food and water can lead to famine and drought in certain regions of the world. If there is a cupcake scarcity in your kitchen, there are very few cupcakes around, and you're not sure if any are coming anytime soon. The two most common synonyms are shortage and lack. The most common collocation is scarcity of resources. For example, in the TOEFL reading texts, you might see a sentence like this. Scarcity of resources in the desert region forced nomadic tribes to migrate in search of water. Finally, number 20 is deteriorate. Deteriorate. This is another super popular word for the TOEFL test, and you see it practically everywhere. When something deteriorates, it means it gets worse over time. For example, if you don't take care of your things, like a bicycle or a toy, they can deteriorate and break down. So deteriorate basically means that things go from good to bad over time. There is a similar word starting with a D. Let's see if you can spot it. And the right answer is B, decay. Deteriorate, decay, get worse are all synonymous. I've collected 37 words. You'll see a lot on the TOEFL reading and listening sections that'll help you get the score you want. You'll also see many of them on the writing and speaking parts of the test. So let's get right to them. As always, don't forget to take a piece of paper and make 2 columns. In one column, put a plus for the words you know. In the second column, put a minus and write the word itself. This will help you remember the words you didn't know. At the end of this video, write winner in the comments if you know all the words, or tell us how many words from the list you knew. The first word in our list is the word abruptly. Abruptly means suddenly or unexpectedly. You'll see this word a lot on the TOEFL. You can use it in essays, especially in the writing for an academic discussion task. You can also use it in speaking, when summarizing lectures in questions 3 and 4. For example, the car stopped abruptly when the driver slammed on the brakes. So remember, abruptly equals suddenly. 2. Derive from. When you say that something derives or is derived from something else, you mean that it comes from that thing. People can derive money from foreign investments, derive satisfaction from playing sports, or derive revenue from oil. Many of our modern technologies derive from or come from scientific discoveries made in the 20th century. 3. Facilitate. To make a process easier or more efficient. Using a calendar application can facilitate keeping track of your appointments. Another word on our list is abandon. It means to leave something or someone behind, or to give up on something. Someone might abandon their job, their family, or children, which is a negative usage. Or an idea. For example, when the car stopped working, the driver had to abandon it and call for help. 5. Date back to. To have existed since a certain time in the past. This phrase is extremely popular in reading passages and academic lectures about archaeology. Let's say you're reading about archaeological excavations. You can see a sentence. The ancient ruins date back to the Roman Empire. 6. Accumulate. To gather or collect over time. People can accumulate knowledge through study or experience. They might also accumulate energy, money, experience, or days off. On the TOEFL, you might see a sentence like this. Solar panels accumulate energy from the sun throughout the day. This means that they collect energy from the sun. 7. Viable. When something is viable, it has the ability to grow or function properly. A viable business has the resources to succeed. This word is a synonym for workable or feasible. And again, you'll see it quite often in TOEFL reading passages and lectures. You can say that the proposed plan is viable and can be implemented within the next few months. 8. Rely on. To depend on or trust something or someone to do something. I rely on my smartphone to stay organized and keep track of important tasks. You can rely on your friends and family, rely on the weather, or rely on technology. 9. Ban. To officially prohibit something. The school has decided to ban cell phones in class. This word is so good for the TOEFL speaking section, especially the second question. You may also use it in the writing for an academic discussion task. When talking about the official decisions and new policies. 10. Compelling. Something compelling is very convincing, or interesting. The plot of the movie was so compelling that I couldn't stop watching it. 11. Boost. To increase or improve something. Drinking a smoothie in the morning can boost your energy for the day. 12. Adjust. To change something slightly, to make it better or more suitable. I had to adjust the car seat so that I could reach the pedals comfortably. 13. Curtail. To stop something before it's finished, or to reduce or limit something. The company decided to curtail its spending. Now, at the beginning of this video, I said that your vocabulary is the second most common reason for not reaching the target score on the reading and listening sections. What is the first? It's not being familiar with the strategies for each type of question and not knowing how to use them effectively in each situation. Let's take a look at a typical TOEFL student I see most often in my Zoom classes. They know many advanced words. They can understand the text perfectly. They even know some strategies, but they can't apply these strategies in different situations. And they're struggling with time. They put too much effort into each type of question. They don't know how to avoid common pitfalls on the test. And they end up frustrated at the end of each section. If you want to solve all these problems and ace the TOEFL reading section, click on the link below and join our TOEFL course. We'll address all of these issues and teach you high-scoring writing and speaking templates. The link is below. Click on it and get your dream TOEFL score quickly and effectively. We're moving on. 14. Contribute. To give or add something to a larger whole. Volunteers contributed their time and effort to help clean up the park. 15. Deliberately. This adverb means done intentionally or on purpose. She deliberately chose a bright color for the room to make it more cheerful. 13. Address. To address means to deal with or tackle a problem or issue. The manager asked the team to address the issue of the broken equipment. 17. Anticipate. To expect something to happen and perhaps even to prepare for it. No one anticipated this problem. 18. Extinction. Extinction is when a species no longer exists. The dodo bird is famous for its extinction in the 17th century. 19. Decay. To rot or disintegrate over time. The old leaves on the forest floor began to decay. The last two words, extinction and decay, appear repeatedly in reading passages and lectures about archaeology. While this video focuses more on the general advanced vocabulary you might need for the TOEFL test, you should also remember to cover the vocabulary specific to the fields of archaeology, biology, art, history, and others. We already have videos on biology, zoology, history, and astronomy vocabulary, but we'll soon have one on archaeology as well. So stay tuned and don't miss out. 20. Extract. To remove or take something out of a larger whole. The chef had to extract the juice from the lemon for the recipe. 21. Arduous. Something that is arduous is very difficult and requires a lot of effort. This word is often used to describe tiring activities. Climbing the mountain was an arduous task, but the view at the top was worth it. 22. Attribute. To regard something as being caused by something else. We attribute the success of the event to the hard work of the volunteers. 23. Consensus. A general agreement among a group of people. The team reached a consensus to start the project next month. 24. Fertile. In agriculture, fertile describes land that is capable of producing abundant crops or vegetation. The fertile soil in the valley is perfect for growing vegetables. 25. Hamper. Hamper means to slow down or make difficult. The blizzard hampered the delivery of packages. 26. Counter. To counter means to respond to something with an opposing opinion or action. The scientist has countered the claim with new evidence. 27. Deceive. To make someone believe something that is not true. The magician deceived the audience with his clever tricks. 28. Customize. to change something to suit one's own needs or preferences. You can customize your phone settings to suit your preferences. 29, dense. Tightly packed or having a lot of material in a small space. The fog was so dense that you could hardly see the car in front of you. 30, enable. To make something possible or to make someone able to do something. The new app will enable users to track their exercise progress. 31, deficiency. A deficiency is a lack or shortage of something that is needed. I can say, the doctor found a calcium deficiency in the patient's blood test. 32, eradicate. To eradicate means to completely destroy or get rid of something. Scientists are working hard to eradicate malaria from affected regions. 33, disruption. A major disturbance or interruption. The power outage caused a major disruption in our workday. 34, expose. To make something visible or reveal it. The documentary aims to expose the truth about wildlife trafficking. 35, distinguish. To distinguish means to recognize the differences between two people, ideas, or things. It's easy to distinguish between a cat and a dog by their size and characteristics. 36, durable. Something that is durable is built to withstand wear, pressure, or damage. A durable material, such as stainless steel, for example, doesn't rust or break easily. 37, estimate. To make an approximate calculation of the cost or size of something. We need to estimate how much paint is needed to cover the room. These were the 37 words you'll definitely need to tackle the TOEFL reading and listening sections. As you've already noticed, many of them can also be used in your writing and speaking responses. Thanks for watching. If you want to master all 4 sections of the TOEFL exam and get a great score on test day, click on the link below.
This video, I have collected 57 of the most common words you'll see on the TOEFL reading and listening sections that'll help you get the score you want. 1. Commodity. This word is super popular on the TOEFL, and I often see it in the reading passages. What's more important, it's often necessary to answer the questions. So, a commodity is any useful or valuable thing, especially something that you can buy or sell, like food, clothes, or electronics. So coffee, grains, or precious metals are all examples of commodities. I've just seen this word mentioned a few times in 2 random reading passages, so it's really common for the TOEFL reading. 2. Exploit. If you use someone or something, usually selfishly or for profit, you'll exploit them. Factory owners can exploit their employees, making them work overtime. So to exploit is to use something or someone unfairly for your own benefit. On the TOEFL, however, you'll often see this word used in a slightly different sense. It usually means to make good use of something. For example, to exploit natural resources. The next word on our list is cultivate. The original meaning of this word is to prepare and use land for crops or gardening. So you'll often see it used in texts and lectures about agriculture. People can cultivate fields, gardens, or land. This word can also mean to develop or improve something, such as a skill or relationship. 4. Demise. Demise is the end of something. It can be the end of a person's life or anything else. We often use this word in medical or legal language, or when we want to sound formal. On the TOEFL, you'll often see this word used to describe the final stage of something. For example, the demise of a company, or the demise of a relationship. 5. Prosperity. Another super popular word on the TOEFL test that I see all the time. Prosperity usually means being successful, especially financially. In the US, the decades after World War II were characterized by rising prosperity, with large numbers of people moving into the middle class. The adjective prosperous is also very typical for the TOEFL reading and listening sections. It means financially successful. Speaking of the word decade from the example I just gave, this is our next word. A decade is a period of 10 years. We have a decade, 10 years, a century, 100 years, and a millennium, 1,000 years. We actually have an entire course dedicated to TOEFL preparation, where we teach you all the words you need to know to score consistently high on each section of the test. We have lists of words organized by topic, templates for effective speaking and writing responses, strategies for each question type, and more. I'll leave the link to the course below. Another important word to know is alteration. Alteration means a change or modification. The verb to alter means to make something different or to change something, such as altering a plan or altering a law. Remember 3 words with a similar meaning: to alter, to modify, to change. You'll often need them for the TOEFL reading. 8. Intermittently. I can't tell you how many times I see this word. It's a fancy way of saying from time to time, periodically. The adverb intermittently describes something that starts, then stops, and then starts up again. If you studied intermittently last night, it means that sometimes you studied, but sometimes you took breaks to do other things. A phrase with a similar meaning is off and on. We came across it just recently in one of our reading videos. This phrase means that something happens periodically, like working off and on, or visiting off and on. So remember, off and on or intermittently mean at intervals, not continuously. 10. Extensive. For some reason, this is one of the favorite words of the TOEFL creators. They use it in practically every reading passage or lecture I've ever worked with, and believe me, there have been many. The first and the most popular meaning is covering a large area. For example, extensive road repairs, extensive grounds, or extensive agriculture. So imagine something that covers a large area. That's extensive. Extensive can also mean having a great range. If your knowledge of the TOEFL test is extensive, you know a lot about it. If an event gets extensive coverage in the newspapers, it means many people are writing about it. Next is the word sophisticated. When something is sophisticated, it's complicated and intricate. The inner workings of a computer are sophisticated. It's difficult to understand them unless you're a computer expert. High school math is a lot more sophisticated than grammar school math. Driving a car is more sophisticated than riding a bike. On the TOEFL, you'll often find mentions of sophisticated computer models, sophisticated systems, or sophisticated tools used by Asian people. 12. Diverse. Various, very different. It's another common word that pops up in almost every passage. Diverse means that something has many different parts or elements, such as diverse culture or diverse wildlife. 13. Abruptly. Suddenly or without warning. 14. Result in. To cause something to happen. For example, high economic growth results in higher inflation. 15. Mild. Not severe or intense. We often use mild when talking about the weather or climate. Mild weather isn't too cold or too hot. This is the meaning that's most popular on the TOEFL test. However, this word can also be used in other areas. For example, mild criticism, not severe. A mild heart attack, not too serious. The next group of words have similar meanings. They are drastically, dramatically, and spectacularly. I see all 3 of them all the time, both in the reading and listening. On the TOEFL, they usually mean extremely or a lot. For example, their budget has been drastically reduced. Reduced a lot. The nature of conflict has changed dramatically. Has changed a lot. This attempt failed spectacularly. Significantly failed. 19. Tolerate. To accept or put up with something. You can tolerate noise or a person. Some people don't tolerate rude behavior. 20. Threat. An impending danger that has the potential to cause serious harm. TOEFL reading passages usually have many examples of threats, such as enemy threats, health threats, death threats, and so on. A popular collocation is imminent threat. It's a synonym for impending danger. One more very common word on both the reading and listening sections of the TOEFL is decline. To decline means to decrease or diminish in quantity or quality. We use it when something is getting smaller or worse. For example, the decline of a business or the decline of a population. 22. Coerce. To force someone to do something against their will. You can coerce a person to do something, or coerce a decision or a confession from a person. Again, just recently, I saw this word in one of the reading passages we were doing in a one-on-one session with my student. 23. Retreat. To go away from a place or person, to escape from fighting or danger. The TOEFL likes to use this word in a variety of contexts. You can find information about lizards retreating into the shade, or retreating shares of a company. We can even find it in the integrated speaking questions. For example, question 3 may be about a psychological term in which the speaker understands that their proposals were clearly unreasonable and is forced to retreat. So expect to see this word in many contexts. 24. Initially. In the beginning. At first. 25. Eventually. In the end. Especially after a long time or a lot of effort. A similar word that is often given as a paraphrase for the word eventually is ultimately. It means finally, after a series of things have happened. For example, the company ultimately succeeded, or the company ultimately failed. 27. Rival. A few days ago, one of my students made a mistake in the reading passage because she didn't know this word. So I decided to include it in today's list. A rival is a person or thing that competes with another. So it's a synonym for the word competitor. The question she had was the sentence simplification question about terrestrial plants that had the advantages of not having rivals. In the text, there was a line about the land of opportunity, free of competitors. Because she didn't know the word rivals, she couldn't find the right answer. This is a typical example of why you should know synonyms. Otherwise, you'll waste time when answering the questions, and you may make mistakes. 28. Data. Information. 29. Conventional. Usual, traditional, ordinary. It's a super popular word that I've also seen used in vocabulary questions. I also see it a lot in the TOEFL reading passages. You can find information about conventional explanation of something, conventional farming, conventional medicine, or weapons. 30. Supersede. To replace or surpass something. Some common collocations are supersede a law, supersede a record. Let's look at a typical sentence you might see on the TOEFL test. They still used stone tools similar to those superseded in Europe by metal tools thousands of years ago. Superseded, replaced. As you can see, the most effective way to remember all these new and difficult words is to think of simpler synonyms for them that you already know. That way, the next time you see the word supersede, you'll remember the word replace and will know what it means. Another super popular word I decided to include in this list is fossils. This word means remains or impressions of ancient plants or animals. Fossils look like this. You'll often find lectures and texts about fossils of dinosaurs. Again, I see this word all the time, and you just have to know it. 32. Flourish. To grow or develop successfully. Just as your tomatoes can flourish in the summer, countries, companies, cultural life, the shipbuilding industry, computer technology, and lots of other things and spheres can flourish. People can also flourish, which means that they are successful. Remember we talked about the word prosperity earlier? Well, a synonym for to flourish is to prosper. Another synonym for this word we have on our list is to thrive. Your business or your relationships can thrive. So, remember these three words: to thrive, to prosper, to flourish. All of them mean to be successful. 34, disruption, an interruption or disturbance. 35, decay. Another word TOEFL creators love and use all the time. To decay means to rot or become weaker. For example, a building or a relationship can both decay. I recently had a text about how Venice's role as a storage and distribution center for spices, silk, and gold decayed, which means it became weaker and ultimately the city lost its monopoly. If you've taken at least a few TOEFL practice tests, you've probably also come across the idea that carbon decays in living things. Because carbon is radioactive, it decays over time, which means the older artifacts have less carbon than younger ones. This is why so many readings and lectures mention radiocarbon dating, which is a method that uses the decay of carbon to determine the age of organic materials. 36, rigid, stiff, or fixed, something that can be moved or bent. 37, preserve, to keep something from decay or destruction. Simply put, to keep something safe. You can preserve a culture or preserve a historical site. By the way, a site is a place. 38, depletion, the act of reducing or using something up. Some common collocations with this word are depletion of resources, soil depletion, or depletion of a population. 39, estimate, to guess or calculate the cost, size, or value of something. As a verb, this word is pronounced estimate. It can also be used as a noun. In this case, we'd say an estimate. An estimate is a judgment or calculation of approximately how large or how great something is. If the mechanic's bill is much higher than the estimate they gave you, for example, you have a right to be angry. 40, impact, the effect or influence of something on something else. Remember these three words: an impact, an influence, an effect. They are often used as paraphrases on TOEFL. The word impact can also mean the force or action of one object hitting another. For example, the moment two comments collide is called the moment of impact. 41, inhibit, to prevent or stop something from happening. You can inhibit a process or inhibit a reaction. For example, this is the main factor inhibiting online access. Preventing online access. 42, hibernation. This word is extremely common in academic lectures. Hibernation is a type of deep sleep that some animals, such as bears, for example, go into during the winter. So, simply put, hibernation is like taking a long nap. 43, divert. The verb to divert means to change the direction or course of something. The police will divert traffic if there has been an accident, which is blocking the road. And it's a good idea to divert some of your income into a savings account, so you don't spend it all. On the TOEFL, you may find mentions of diverted traffic, information, diverted public attention, or investigation. 44, tremendous, extremely large. For example, tremendous success or tremendous failure. A similar word is enormous. This word also means very big. An animal can be of an enormous size, or your parents can have an enormous influence on your life. 46, emerge, to appear, to come out. Many different things can emerge. For example, details, patterns, trends, differences, or theories. A person can emerge from the crowd, or plants often emerge from the ground. 47, expand. This word comes up all the time on the TOEFL. To expand means to increase in size or scope. You'll find texts about the universe, economy, business, or industries expanding. Markets or cities can also expand. 48, proliferation, the act of increasing or spreading rapidly. 49, escalate, to become greater or more serious. The situation started to escalate around noon. The credit crisis is escalating as expected. 50. Surplus. A surplus is something extra or left over. If your tree produces more apples than you can eat, you can make applesauce with the surplus of apples. You will often come across texts about surplus food, surplus money, surplus supplies. 51. Eliminate. This word is a must on the reading and listening sections of the TOEFL. To eliminate means to remove or get rid of something. This is what you do with the 4 answer options you get. First, you eliminate 2 options that are definitely wrong. You can also eliminate a problem, a possibility, or a risk. 52. Purchase. To buy something. For example, purchase a house or a car. 53. Obtain. To get something. You can obtain a degree, obtain information, permission, approval, or obtain a job. The next 3 words on our list have similar meanings. They are obligatory, mandatory, and compulsory. If something is obligatory, mandatory, or compulsory, you must do it because of a rule or a law. For example, this is mandatory to help prevent fraud. Registration was obligatory, but voting was optional. The study skills courses were almost always compulsory. You'll see these words all the time, so be sure to write them down if you don't know them. 57. Predominant. More noticeable or important, or greater in number than others. The predominant colors, however, were black and yellow. We did it! Congratulations! These were the 57 words you'll definitely need to tackle the TOEFL reading and listening sections. As you've already noticed, many of them can also be used in your writing and speaking responses. Thanks for watching! Please note below how many words you already knew. If you want to master all 4 sections of the TOEFL exam and get a great score on test day, click on the link below.
As you probably know, the reading section consists of 3 texts, each followed by 10 questions. Obviously, we won't have time to do all 3 parts of the section, so we'll just do one. I read the heading to get a general understanding of the passage. The passage is about the westward migration. Then I go straight to the first question without reading the text. It's an inference question, where we have to draw a conclusion from the text. It asks, what can be inferred from paragraph 1 about Western farmers prior to 1815? In other words, what conclusion can I draw about Western farmers before 1815? The word to focus on here is prior, which means before. You must always pay attention when you see time clues in the question, because they help you find the right part of the text. Now, pause the video and try to answer this question yourself. Ready to check? I'm quickly scanning the text, looking for this information, and here it is. After 1815, improved transportation enabled more and more Western farmers to escape a self-sufficient way of life and enter a national market economy. So, I see that after 1815, Western farmers entered a natural market economy. This means that before 1815, they didn't do that. This makes answer D correct. Options A, B, and C are incorrect. You can use keywords to double check that in the text. Pause the video and analyze the highlighted parts of the text. Moving on to question 2. What's the purpose of the statement? This question asks us to find the reason why the author includes this sentence. We can see that it's at the end of the paragraph, which means it probably contains an example to illustrate a point or draws a conclusion. I use the first part of the paragraph to answer the first question. So now I should focus on the second part of the paragraph. I see that the rate of westward migration increased spectacularly. Everybody was moving westward. Emigration to the west reached a peak in the 1830s. And then the sentence I have serves as an illustration of how many people moved westward. So the correct answer is C, to emphasize the range and speed with which the westward migration occurred. It's not A, because there is nothing mentioned about how population shifts occur generally. We're talking about a specific situation. It's definitely not B. Finally, there is nothing mentioned about the fact that Americans found the Appalachian Mountains attractive. Question 3. This is a vocabulary question. They're either super easy or super challenging, depending on whether you know the word in the question and the answer options provided or not. Don't forget to pause the video and tackle the question yourself first. The word in question is fringes. In British English, a fringe is the same as bangs, which means hair that is cut short and straight at the top of your face. So, it's the outer edge of your hair. Fringe also means a border or outer edge of an area or group. So, the right answer is A. If you're not sure, you can try to eliminate the two options that are 100% incorrect. You can also check out the sentence and try to guess the meaning of the word from context. For example, here we read about settlers who kept pushing westward beyond the fringes of settlement. I can change fringes to the edge of settlement. So the word borders is the closest in meaning. If you have problems with vocabulary questions, feel free to go through the academic word list. It contains 570 words that often appear in academic texts. Also, study topic-specific vocabulary. We prepared special PDF files on various topics on our TOEFL course, so that you don't need to worry about how to replenish your vocabulary. Let's keep going. Well, this is one of my favorite questions. I know most students hate it because they think it's super challenging. However, if you know the right strategy, it's not as intimidating as it looks. It's called a sentence simplification question. All we need to do is simplify the highlighted sentence by breaking it into 2 or 3 main ideas. Also, pay attention to transitions. They help a lot to track the direction of ideas. So, we can see that the West has plenty of attractions. Then, we have a list of natural attractions, which means natural landscapes. We don't want to focus on details too much. Then, we learn that they were tempting, which means appealing to New England farmers who had to work with rocky and sterile land, and to southeastern farmers who had problems with land. So, simply put, both New England farmers and southeastern farmers had problems with the land, which is why they found the land of the West attractive. Now that I've formulated the simplified version of the sentence, let's look at the answer options. The correct answer is B. The fertile soils of the West drew farmers from regions with barren soils. This sentence is the closest to the short summary of the sentence I just made. If you find this question challenging, start by eliminating 2 answer options that are clearly incorrect. They're usually easy to spot. In this case, you might have eliminated A and D, because they simply don't mention farmers at all. Then choose between the remaining 2 options. You see, not as difficult as it may seem. It's all about approaching these questions mechanically and knowing what to do for each question type. Also, expand your academic vocabulary and read a lot of texts about biology, chemistry, astronomy, and so on. This will help you understand better. The next question is the factual information question. It asks us to find information that is given in the text. According to paragraph 3, what was the significance of the land law passed in 1820? So, I need to find the importance of the land law passed in 1820. For this question type, I recommend identifying the keywords in the question that will help you find the right part of the paragraph. Usually it's a sentence or 2. My keywords are land law and 1820. An important note. I already used the first sentence of this paragraph to answer the previous question, which is why most likely I won't need this sentence to answer this question. So I begin reading from the second sentence. I see that because of this law, a farm costs only $100. This is super cheap. Then I can see that the text starts talking about banks and loans, which is not what I'm interested in. If you want, you can still finish the remaining paragraph, just to be sure you're not missing any important information. However, it's not necessary here. Coming back to the answer options, I can see that B is the right answer. It provided farmland at an affordable price. $100 is very affordable. Great job! Let's keep going. Another vocabulary question. As you can see, this one is about proliferation, which again proves to me that I shouldn't have continued reading the text to answer the previous question. This is a very important tip. Questions on the TOEFL reading section usually go in order. So if you already used part of the text to answer one question, you are unlikely to need this part to answer the next question for the same paragraph. Proliferation means a rapid increase in the number or amount of something. We know synonyms such as growth, rapid increase, spread, and so on. So the right answer is A, growth. It's definitely not cooperation, importance, or success. Again, if you don't know this word, you should expand your academic vocabulary. Question 7 is another inference question. Since we need to find out what can be inferred about flatboats and keelboats, we will first look for these words in the paragraph. It's pretty easy to spot them because they're next to each other in the second sentence of the paragraph. The sentence reads, although flatboats and keelboats continued to be important until the 1850s, steamboats eventually superseded all other craft in the carrying of passengers and freight. For those of you who don't know what supersede means, it means to replace something older or less efficient. So, by reading this sentence, I can already understand that steamboats were newer and more efficient than flatboats and keelboats. Now, let's look at the next sentence, which says that steamboats were not only faster, but also transported upriver freight for about 1/10 of what it had previously cost on hand-propelled keelboats. This sentence clearly shows that steamboats were faster and cheaper. Therefore, choice B is the only possible answer to this question. The next one is the negative factual information question. The important thing to remember is that you have to find a statement that is not in the text. Many of the students I see in one-on-one sessions get so excited when they find one of the answer options in the text that they mark it as correct and move on to the next question. But remember, you're looking for the answer that is not correct. Our first step is to identify keywords in the answer choices. As I scan the passage, I first come across some numbers that turn out to be the cost of transporting freight. I can now eliminate choice B. Then I see the word produce close to the word rivers, which allows me to eliminate choice D. Finally, at the end of the sentence, I see 3 words: a shorter route. This should eliminate choice A as well. In the end, I'm left with choice C, which is the correct answer. As you can see, the elimination strategy works best for this type of question. Let's move on to the next question. This type of question is called insert text. The main tip for this question is to look for pronouns or other small and often neglected words in the bolded sentence that can hint at the meaning of the sentences surrounding it. The bolded sentence in this text has one such word. It's the word more. More is followed by cheaply, which means that the sentence preceding the bolded one should be talking about the cost of something. I quickly scan the paragraph looking for the word cost or its synonyms, and I easily find the right sentence. It's sentence 3, which says, The cost of transporting bulky grains in this fashion was several times greater than their value in Eastern markets. So, I can add the bolded sentence right after sentence 3. The correct answer is choice C. Finally, there is the prose summary question. The key to success on this question is to select main ideas and not minor details. Therefore, if you see a sentence that expresses a minor idea, eliminate it immediately because it will never be the correct answer. Also, if the sentence is irrelevant to the introductory sentence given in the instructions, feel free to eliminate it as well. Now back to the question. The introductory sentence is: the westward movement of population across the United States led to expanded agricultural production. Our goal is to choose 3 more sentences that summarize the passage. Choice A seems general enough to be considered the main idea. Also, as you can see, it summarizes the second paragraph of the passage. You should already remember the information in the second paragraph from answering the previous questions. But if not, you should always review the passage to refresh your memory. Finally, choice A doesn't contradict the passage, which makes it a perfect candidate for our first correct answer. Choice B is also a general statement. It effectively summarizes the third paragraph by talking about both fertility and government policies. It doesn't contradict the text, so we have our second correct answer. Congratulations! Choice C is another general statement. It talks about how commercial farming was improved by some changes in land and water transportation. This sentence perfectly summarizes the last 2 paragraphs of the passage. I can't believe we got so lucky today. 3 correct answers in a row. Choices A, B, and C are the sentences we should choose to answer this question. Choices D, E, and F are either too specific or irrelevant to the introductory sentence. Well done! As you can see, once you know what strategies to use and have enough practice, the TOEFL reading questions are not as difficult as they seem. Of course, since I'm a teacher and I have more experience with these questions than you may, don't be disappointed if some of them are still challenging to you. However, with little effort and a lot of determination, you'll be acing the TOEFL reading section in no time. Again, if you want me to help you make this process faster and much easier, join our course and show the test who is boss. The link is in the description below. I have no clue how to get a high score on the TOEFL reading. I keep scoring 21 or 22 or lower when I practice. I can't finish this section on time because every time I take a practice test, there are usually 3 or 4 super challenging questions that take up most of my time. I hate the insert text question type. How am I supposed to know where to put a sentence in the paragraph if I'm not the author? And the summary question just kills me. The options they offer are all so similar. I'm so confused by all these advanced words. Do the TOEFL makers expect me to know about space, geology, archaeology, or art history in English? I know all the strategies, but I still make mistakes when it comes to doing practice tests. What should I do? These are just some of the typical questions TOEFL students bombard me with when it comes to the reading section. In our TOEFL prep course, we have the Pro package, which gives students a consultation with me at the end of the course. Its purpose is to evaluate their speaking and writing skills and give them a score they are likely to get on the day of the test. But the funny thing is that about 60% of the time, students who come to these sessions ask me to focus on the reading instead because they 1. Can't consistently get the score they need, 2. Fail to finish all the questions on time, 3. Don't understand the academic words they come across, 4. Can't effectively use the strategies they learned for every question type, and 5. Often overthink the questions. So, if you're a TOEFL test taker and have no idea how to tackle the TOEFL reading section, this is the video for you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to get more test-taking tips and click the bell icon to be notified when the next video comes out. Today, we're going to analyze a passage from the TOEFL reading section. so that you can see for yourself that this section is not as scary as it may seem. We'll analyze the question types, review the strategies for them, and most importantly, learn how to apply these strategies to real tests. If you're watching this video now and want to know the templates that make up half of your answers and allow you to score high on the TOEFL speaking and writing sections, click on the link down below. You can choose the Pro package if you want to have your essays and speaking responses scored. I personally find this option the most helpful because I'll tell you exactly what you are doing wrong and what you should do differently to get a higher score. I often see students with a good level of English who could have scored high, but they just do the wrong things and keep scoring low. And very often, there are just a few little things that stand between them and getting the score they really deserve. For example, in many consultations, we practice the first question of the speaking section, and I show how to break it down into several steps. That way, when you have 45 seconds to speak, you no longer panic, but know exactly what to say. I'm even starting to think about sharing some of these tips on this channel because I feel like it would have made many students' lives a lot easier. Let me know if you'd find that interesting. The passage we'll cover today is about the rise of Teotihuacan, an ancient city near Mexico City. On the day of the test, you'll have 2 passages like this with 10 questions after each. You can watch my other video where I discuss a different passage about the westward migration for more practice. If you have problems with advanced vocabulary or want to test how well you know it, feel free to check out these 3 videos. Back to our passage. Don't read the text. Go straight to the first question. If you're a fast reader, you might go through the passage first, but in my experience, it's not necessary. This is a negative factual information question because we see the word except. This means that we need to find what information is not given in the text. For this type of question, look at the answer options and then read the paragraph. As always, pause the video and answer the question yourself first. Then continue watching to see if you're right. The correct answer is 2. Several administrative centers spread across the city. The text mentions an administrative center, but not several centers spread across the city. An indefinite article equals 1. The other options are all listed as features of the city. Remember, information in the text will usually be paraphrased. For example, regularly arranged streets, a regular grid pattern of streets and buildings, many manufacturing workshops, a large number of industrial workshops, apartment complexes, over 2,000 apartment complexes. To recap, for this question type, it's much easier to look through the options, identify the keywords, and then read the paragraph, already having in mind what you're looking for. Question 2. Vocabulary question. I always say that there are 2 types of vocabulary questions. The ones where you know the word in question, and in this case, finding the right answer is usually a piece of cake. And the ones where you don't know the word. Such questions are more challenging. A typical mistake many students make is only trying to guess the meaning of the unfamiliar word from context. Very often, context won't give you much information about the word's meaning. So, apart from doing that, you might also try to analyze the word itself. Look at its prefix, suffix, and root. Now, take your time to answer this question. Ingenuity is a noun. An adjective is ingenious. A genius is a person who is very clever, which means that ingenious is someone who shows creativity and talent and is very smart. So, ingenuity is cleverness. Don't confuse the adjective ingenious with a similar adjective, ingenuous. An ingenuous person is innocent and unsuspecting. 3. Another negative factual information question. we need to find a statement that's not mentioned in the text. So start by analyzing the statements first, and then read the paragraph. The right answer is 3, a long period of volcanic inactivity in the Teotihuacan Valley. Remember that you're looking for the option that is not stated in the text. Many students often get so excited to find the first statement in the text that they mark it as the right option and move on. That's why they capitalize words like not and except in the text. To eliminate one option, you need to find all other 3 statements in the text. Let's find them. The presence of obsidian in the Teotihuacan Valley. The obsidian resources in the valley itself. For the record, obsidian is a dark natural glass that looks like this. The potential for extensive irrigation of Teotihuacan Valley lands. The valley's potential for extensive irrigation. Irrigation is when we water land or crops. Teotihuacan's location on a natural trade route. Geographic location on a natural trade route to the south and east of the Valley of Mexico. 4. An inference question. In this type of question, you need to draw a conclusion based on the text. For this particular question, I need to find what can be inferred from paragraph 3 about Coihuilco prior to 200 BC. Prior means before. As I go through the paragraph, I try to break it into a few simple main ideas. The paragraph mentions that prior to 200 BC, Coihuilco was the largest of several relatively small centers in and near the Valley of Mexico. Around 200 BC, a volcanic eruption seriously affected Coihuilco, covering much of its agricultural land with lava. The eruption eliminated Coihuilco as a potential rival, enabling other towns, including Teotihuacan, to emerge as leading economic and political centers. So the fact that Coihuilco's agricultural land was destroyed eliminated it as a potential rival. This means that before 200 BC, its economy relied heavily on agriculture. So D is correct. Watch out for keywords, especially those connected to time. They usually provide you with the key information to answer the question. 5. Another vocabulary question. Predominant is the strongest or main, so principal is the right answer. Again, if you don't know this word, think about the adjective dominant or the noun dominance. Both of them signify power and influence. This will make it easier for you to choose the correct synonym. If you struggle with academic vocabulary, you can watch this video and test how ready you are to take the TOEFL test. There, I use a lot of TOEFL vocabulary questions, so it's a great way to drill this type of question as well. Moving on. Question 6. Which of the following allow Teotihuacan to have a competitive edge over its neighbors? Let's read the full sentence and try to formulate the answer ourselves first. It seems likely that Teotihuacan's natural resources, along with the city elite's ability to recognize their potential, gave the city a competitive edge over its neighbors. So, there are 2 things that gave the city a competitive edge over its neighbors: its natural resources and the ability of the elite to recognize their potential. As I look through the answer options, I see that A is correct. This is a test on whether or not you know the word commodity. A commodity is any useful or valuable thing, especially something that is bought and sold. Grain, coffee, and precious metals are all commodities. So in this case, natural resources is a paraphrase of the word commodity. They were available or readily available, and the elite could recognize their potential. They were well exploited. Question 7. This is a factual information question. In this type of question, you need to find detailed information based on the paragraph. For this question type, you should carefully read the question, identify keywords, and then locate the right part of the paragraph and read it. It will usually be 1 to 3 sentences. Pause the video now and give it a try. The keywords are research, Obsidian tools, and Almec sites. As I scan the paragraph, I see that recent research on Obsidian tools found in Almec sites has shown that some of the obsidian obtained by the Olmecs originated near Teotihuacan. This means that they got obsidian from the place near Teotihuacan, which means the D is correct. Just for the record, if you keep reading, you'll see the word commodity used once again, so it's a useful word to know. 8. In paragraph 6, the author discusses the thriving obsidian operation in order to. For this question, we need to find why the author discusses the thriving obsidian operation. So let's find it in the text. It's right in the second sentence. For this type of question, I usually suggest reading the sentence before and after the one that contains the information given. So, let's read the first 3 sentences and find the right answer. Ready to check? I can see that the information in the question is given as an example. This means that it illustrates something given in the previous sentence. The picture of Teotihuacan that emerges is a classic picture of positive feedback among several factors. I can also see that all this led to increased wealth. So option C is correct. Moving on. Time for my favorite question, insert text question. It's one of the most challenging questions for students, so in our course, we usually dedicate a lot of time to help you master it and complete it in a fast and effective way. The major problem with this question is that most students try to really understand the whole paragraph and waste a lot of time on that. So, even if they end up with the right answer, which they usually don't, they still spend too much time on the question and often have to rush later on. In this question type, you need to find where the sentence could be added to the passage. Take your time to answer this question. The right answer is D. In the last sentence of the paragraph, we learn that the city had economic and perhaps religious contacts with most parts of Mesoamerica. And then we add our sentence, which illustrates this fact. It provides examples of how far its contacts went. Finally, the summary question. You should complete the summary by selecting the 3 answer choices that express the most important ideas in the passage. For this question type, you should 1. Choose the major ideas. 2. Avoid options that are too general, which makes them irrelevant, and also options that are too specific, which makes them minor details. 3. Choose the options that contain several ideas mentioned in the text. Ideally, those that contain the main ideas of a few paragraphs. And 4. Avoid choosing 2 options that cover the same information. The right answers are A, D, and E. All these options contain many ideas that we already remember from doing the previous questions. If you don't remember any of them, you can always come back to the text and quickly scan each paragraph, looking for the main idea. It's not very difficult, as you already know many paragraphs well from doing questions 1 to 9. A small tip from me. As you go through the previous questions, pause for a second as you move from one paragraph to another, and think about the main idea of the paragraph you just covered. You can even write these main ideas down, very quickly obviously, as you go through the text. This will save you a lot of your time later when you do the summary question. as you won't need to go back to the text at this stage. If you want to know how to score high on the TOEFL reading section, this is the video for you. Today we're going to analyze a passage from the TOEFL reading section together. And at the end of the video, I'll give you the ultimate prep strategy to consistently score high on the TOEFL reading section. So be sure to watch until the end. Let's get started. Question 1. According to paragraph 1, which of the following is true of the late Cretaceous climate? The factual information question. The keyword is the late Cretaceous climate. So I need to find the part of the paragraph that talks about it. Let's read it. Data from diverse sources, including geochemical evidence, preserved in seafloor sediments, indicate that the late Cretaceous climate was milder than today's. The days were not too hot, nor the nights too cold. The summers were not too warm, nor the winters too frigid. The shallow seas on the continents probably buffered the temperature of the nearby air, keeping it relatively constant. The main conclusion is that the climate at that time was milder than it is today. Now, looking at the choices, I can immediately see that D is the correct answer. Mild weather is pleasant because it's neither extremely hot nor extremely cold. So it doesn't change much from season to season. I can always double check that all the other options are not correct. A is incorrect because the summers were not too warm, nor the winters too frigid. B is incorrect because the shallow seas on the continents kept the temperature relatively constant. Now, C is wrong because the climate was milder than today's, so it wasn't very similar. A few words to remember. Mild climate, not too cold, not too hot. Off and on, or on and off, at intervals, once in a while. Flourish, thrive, extensive, covering a large area. Diverse, very different. Shallow, not deep. Dramatically, in this context, in a noticeable way, a lot. Plate tectonics. This, by the way, is what we teach you in our TOEFL course. We go through the question types, discuss the strategies, and then analyze complete reading sections together, similar to what we're doing now, but in more depth, so that you learn how to apply these strategies on the real TOEFL test. This will help you feel confident on test day. You will also learn the templates for high-scoring answers on the speaking and writing sections, important vocabulary for the listening section, and tips and tricks to improve your timing during the test. The link to the course is below. If you need help with your TOEFL preparation, click on it and join our TOEFL community. Question 2. Why does the author mention the survival of snakes, lizards, turtles, and crocodiles in paragraph 3? This is the rhetorical purpose question. For this question, it's good to know these words: to argue, to illustrate, to question, to explain, to present, to refute, to know, to support. The first thing to do here is to read the entire sentence. If true, though, why did cold-blooded animals, such as snakes, lizards, turtles, and crocodiles, survive the freezing winters and torrid summers? It's a question. So, without even looking anywhere else in the text, my bet would be that the right answer is B, to question something. That's why I say it's important to know the words I just mentioned. But let's double check. The question starts with if true, which means it refers back to something already mentioned in the text. This means you need the previous paragraph. After reading it, I see that first, the seaways retreated from the continents. Then, they pulled back, which made climates around the world more extreme, less mild, as we now know. And maybe dinosaurs could not tolerate these extreme temperature changes and became extinct. So, the question we have does indeed question the adequacy of the hypothesis that climatic change related to sea levels caused the extinction of the dinosaurs, which means that B is correct. Question 3. Another factual information question. According to paragraph 3, which of the following is true of changes in climate before the Cretaceous period and the effects of these changes on dinosaurs? This question addresses the same paragraph, which is quite common on the TOEFL test. We also already know that the paragraph begins by questioning the theory about climate change related to sea levels causing the extinction of dinosaurs. So, let's keep reading to find out more. The text says that it's hard to understand why snakes, lizards, turtles, and crocodiles would not be affected, while dinosaurs were affected. We also learned that shallow seaways had retreated from and advanced on the continents many times during the Mesozoic era. So it's odd that dinosaurs had survived the earlier climate changes, but not this one. Finally, we get to the most important sentence. Although initially appealing, the hypothesis of a simple climatic change related to sea levels is insufficient to explain all the data. This means that climate changes associated with the movement of seaways before the Cretaceous period did not cause dinosaurs to become extinct, which is why A is the correct option. A short break for some vocabulary. Numerous, many, not few, torrid, very hot and dry. The text mentions torrid summers. At the mercy of, in the power of. Maintain, keep. Retreat, move back, withdraw. Let's move on. Question 4. The vocabulary question. Fluctuations are variations. Think of them as waves that go up and down, up and down. Fluctuations, variations. Question 5. Which of the sentences below best expresses the essential information in the highlighted sentence in paragraph 4? The famous sentence simplification question. Read the sentence, break it down into 2 or 3 main ideas. Pay close attention to any linking words or conjunctions, and then formulate your summary before looking at the answer options. Let's give it a try. Many plants and animals disappear abruptly from the fossil record as one moves from layers of rock documenting the end of the Cretaceous up into rocks representing the beginning of the Cenozoic era after the Mesozoic. So many plants and animals suddenly disappear. Abruptly equals suddenly. Disappear from where? From the fossil record. The fossil record is this. It's made up of all the fossils that have been found, along with their relative ages. As we go from rocks that document the end of the Cretaceous period into the rocks that document the beginning of the Cenozoic era, the era after the Mesozoic. If we don't have animals and plants in the fossil record, it means that we didn't find the fossils, which are remnants of animals or plants, which means that they went extinct. So A is the right answer. A few tips here. As you read the sentence, focus on the main ideas, not on the words you don't know. Also, if the question is difficult, start by eliminating 2 incorrect options straight away, and then choose between the remaining 2. Question 6. In paragraph 4, all of the following questions are answered except the negative factual information question. For this question, we need to find what's not given in the text. So start by analyzing the answer options first, then read the paragraph. A is correct. All the other questions are answered in the text. B is answered in this part of the text. Scientists felt that they could get an idea of how long the extinctions took by determining how long it took to deposit this 1 centimeter of clay. C is answered in this part. Dissatisfaction with conventional explanations for dinosaur extinctions led to a surprising observation that, in turn, has suggested a new hypothesis. D. Why did scientists want more information about the dinosaur extinctions at the end of the Cretaceous is also answered. It's because they were dissatisfied with conventional explanations for dinosaur extinctions. Conventional, standard. A very popular word on the TOEFL test. Question 7 is the inference question. Paragraph 5 implies that a special explanation of the iridium in the boundary clay is needed because for this question type, it's better to read the paragraph, break it into a few main ideas, and then look at the answer options. As I'm reading, I find the part that says, iridium is found in high concentrations in some meteorites. Even today, microscopic meteorites continually bombard Earth, falling on both land and sea. By measuring how many of these meteorites fall to Earth over a given period of time, scientists can estimate how long it might have taken to deposit the observed amount of iridium in the boundary clay. These calculations suggest that a period of about 1 million years would have been required. However, other reliable evidence suggests that the deposition of the boundary clay could not have taken 1 million years. So, the unusually high concentration of iridium seems to require a special explanation. From reading this, I can assume that the amount of iridium in the boundary clay is too great to have come from microscopic meteorites during the time the boundary clay was deposited, which makes D the right answer. Question 8. One more vocabulary question. Disruption of the food chain. To disrupt means to interrupt an event, an activity, or process by causing a disturbance or problem. So B, disturbance, is correct. Question 9. The insert text question. For this question, there are a few strategies you can use to find the right answer faster. If you don't know them, you'll end up wasting too much time. One of these strategies is the use of pronouns, which often helps to eliminate the incorrect options. For example, look at these two sentences. Even today, microscopic meteorites continually bombard Earth, falling on both land and sea. By measuring how many of these meteorites, these shows that the meteorites were already mentioned, which means that if I had to insert this sentence, I would be looking for a sentence like even today, which has the word meteorites in it. Similarly, I can eliminate A. It starts with these calculations, which refers to the estimates, how long it might have taken to deposit the observed amount of iridium in the boundary clay, mentioned in the previous sentence. So I can't break this link and insert my sentence here. B is also incorrect. The sentence, these calculations, suggest that a period of about 1 million years would have been required. Mentions 1 million years. The following sentence contradicts it and says, however, other reliable evidence suggests that the deposition of the boundary clay could not have taken 1 million years. So again, these two sentences are well connected, and I don't want to disrupt, or a new word, this connection. C seems like a good option. Because of other reliable evidence, we learned that the deposition of the boundary clay could not have taken 1 million years, which is why, or consequently, the idea that the iridium in the boundary clay came from microscopic meteorites cannot be accepted. It fits logically in this place, also because the next sentence concludes that because this idea cannot be accepted, the unusually high concentration of iridium seems to require a special explanation. So C is correct. For those wondering, boundary clay looks like this. Finally, the last and most difficult question type is the prose summary question. You should select 3 statements that best describe the main ideas in the reading passage. Let's read the introductory statement. For a long time, scientists have argued that the extinction of the dinosaurs was related to climate change. So we want to choose sentences that would shed more light on the situation. These are the correct answers. They are the main ideas of the paragraphs of the passage. You should remember them from answering the previous questions. They are not too specific nor too general, and they cover as many main ideas from the passage as possible. The first option addresses the first 3 paragraphs that talk about how a climate change hypothesis is insufficient. The second option addresses the 4th and the 5th paragraphs, talking about abrupt extinctions and the high concentration of iridium. Finally, the third one focuses on the last paragraph's main idea. Now, extreme changes in daily and seasonal climates preceded the retreat of the seas back into the major ocean basins is a too specific option, which makes it irrelevant. The retreat of the seaways at the end of the Cretaceous has not been fully explained. Again, irrelevant. We want to choose sentences that would make sense even to a person who didn't read this text. Imagine you want to summarize this text to your friend in just 3 sentences. They have to make sense, otherwise they won't understand it. The last option is again too specific. This was half of the TOEFL reading section. On the real test, you'll get 1 more passage with the same question types. If you're currently preparing for the test and want to check how ready you are, click here to get your writing and speaking scored. Today I have something very exciting for you. We're going to do some TOEFL reading to see how ready you are for the test. So get your pens and pencils ready and let's get started. A quick note here. The TOEFL reading section consists of 2 reading passages with 10 questions after each. We're only going to cover 1 passage today. The text I've prepared for today is about the distributions of tropical bee colonies. It's from the KMF platform. As usual, we'll go straight to the questions without reading the text. This will save us a lot of time. The first question we have here is the vocabulary question. It asks you to find the word that has the closest meaning to the adjective rival in the passage. The options are established, competing, nearby, and different. Feel free to stop the video now and try to answer yourself first. Then listen to my answer. The correct answer is B. A rival is a person who competes with another person for something. The adjective rival then means competing with others. Always start by eliminating 2 answer options that are definitely wrong. The next question is the factual information question. First, take your time to answer the question yourself. Then check out my explanation. The first thing you should do with any type of question is to read the question itself carefully, so that you know what you're looking for. The question says, according to paragraph 2, some species of stingless bees are aggressive, mainly toward. So, we need to find animals that some species of stingless bees are most aggressive to. The keyword here is aggressive, but I may also come across its synonym or paraphrase in the text. As I scan the text, I find the sentence, Hubble and Johnson observed that some species of stingless bees are highly aggressive to members of their species from other colonies, while other species are not. As you can see, we're lucky to have the word aggressive in the text without any paraphrasing. The sentence says that some species of bees are aggressive to bees from other colonies. So D is the correct answer. Other colonies, different colonies. That's it. Remember that for this type of question, you usually only need to read 1 or 2 sentences. You don't have to read the entire paragraph. We'll skip the next question, because on test day, you'll only have 10 questions after the paragraph, not 13 or 14 as in these tests. However, if you're practicing at home, I highly recommend that you try all the questions. The types of questions you'll see on this platform are exactly the same as on the real TOEFL test. There are just more of them. If you get used to covering 3 passages with 13 or 14 questions, imagine how much easier test day will be with only 2 passages and 10 questions after each. That is why I always recommend this platform to my students. It really helps them prepare for the workload on test day. Now, the next question asks, why did Hubble and Johnson begin their study by mapping all the potential nest sites? The question is why, and the key words are study, mapping, and nest sites. I'm looking for a phrase that contains a combination of all of them, or their synonyms. The sentence I can spot almost immediately is, so, as one of the first steps in their study, they map the distributions of trees suitable for nesting. But does the sentence answer my question? No, because the question was why. This means that to find the right answer, I should read the sentence before or after this one. Since my sentence starts with so, the correct answer is most likely in the previous sentence. It says, they recognize that the availability of potential nest sites for colonies could also affect distributions. So A is the correct answer. They did this to determine if the availability of potential nest sites played a role in the distribution of bee colonies. The next question on our agenda is the sentence simplification question. For this one, you should read the highlighted sentence, break it down into a few main ideas, and then find the sentence that comes closest in meaning. You need to find the sentence that could replace the original one so that the primary meaning doesn't change. Let's read the sentence. The number of colonies in the study area was not limited by the availability of suitable trees, and a clumped or regular distribution of colonies was not due to an underlying clumped or regular distribution of potential nest sites. A rather complicated sentence at first glance. So, what do we have here? 1. The availability of trees didn't limit the number of colonies. 2. The distribution of colonies was not due to the distribution of nest sites. This is a simplified version of the sentence, but it's exactly what we need in this case. Time to look at the answer choices. Remember that some of the wrong choices leave out important information from the sentence. Some change it slightly, and some add facts that weren't mentioned in the original sentence. Take your time to find the correct answer. After scanning the answer options, I see that the correct answer is D. Neither the number nor the distribution of colonies could be explained by the availability of suitable nest sites. Trees are used for nesting, so trees and nest sites are synonymous in this context. Let's take a look at the next question. As always, feel free to pause the video and then continue watching for my analysis. What type of question is this? Many of you probably think it's the factual information question, because it starts with according to, but it's the inference question. How could it be the inference question you'd ask? Simply look at the question itself. It doesn't give me any keywords to find the right sentence in the text. Instead, it asks a general question that requires me to read the entire paragraph to find the answer. That is why I always say that you should do lots of practice tests and analyze each question you tackle. That way, you learn to recognize the questions regardless of their wording. In our TOEFL course, we have many lectures with detailed analysis of the TOEFL reading tests to make sure you get the deepest understanding of each question type and can approach them with ease. If you're struggling to get the score you need in this section, click on the link below to sign up. Now, how would we approach this question? We'll start by reading the paragraph and simplifying it as we go. Hubble and Johnson mapped the nests of 5 of the 9 species accurately. 1. The nests of 4 of these species were distributed regularly. 2. 4 species with regular nest distributions were highly aggressive. 3. But the 5th species was not aggressive, and its nests were randomly distributed over the study area. 4. So, what conclusion can we draw? Hubble and Johnson mapped the nests of 5 species of stingless bees, and describe the distribution patterns of those nests. The text says that 4 of the species had regular distributions, while the 5th had a random distribution. So the correct answer is C, which focuses on the distribution pattern of the nests. Remember, if you start looking for keywords in the inference question, you'll most likely pick the wrong answer, such as B, because it mentions the word aggressiveness. So you always have to make your own conclusion based on what you've read. Now, what about the next question? It's the rhetorical purpose question, and it refers to this very paragraph. Remember I always told you to do the questions one by one? This is exactly why you need to do that. We just spent time analyzing this very paragraph to answer the previous question. Now we have the next question for the same paragraph, which saves us a lot of time and allows us to answer within a few minutes. Let's get into it. For this question, you must first read the statement. The 5th species was not aggressive, and its nests were randomly distributed over the study area. Technically, you can already find the right answer and move on to the next question. But let me give you some tips for other questions of this type. You should always remember that the information in the text goes from more general to more specific. For example, information at the end of the paragraph is often an example or detail of something general that was mentioned before. That's why we'll read the 2 sentences before our sentence. Well, we've already read that Hubble and Johnson mapped the nests of 5 of the 9 species of stingless bees accurately, and the nests of 4 of these species were distributed regularly. All 4 species with regular nest distributions were highly aggressive to bees from other colonies of their own species. Our sentence tells us this: the 5th species, the ones whose nests weren't distributed regularly, wasn't aggressive. Its nests were distributed randomly. So the species whose nests were randomly distributed wasn't aggressive, while the 4 whose nests were distributed regularly were aggressive. This means that their aggressiveness depended on nest distribution, which makes B the correct answer. As you can see, I could have chosen the right answer right away, because I already know all this after answering the previous question. Question 8. Paragraph 7 supports which of the following ideas about fights over occupied nests? Another factual information question. Again, you should be able to recognize it even without its typical according to. We need to find information about fights over occupied nests. What many people do is start reading the whole paragraph, try to understand all the little details, get overwhelmed with information, and end up wasting a lot of time. Instead, what you should do is analyze which is the keyword in the question. It's occupied nests. Then I scan the paragraph, not read it, but scan it, and try to find the word occupied. How do I know I'm going to find that word? Well, if you take a quick look at the answer choices, you'll see that many of them mention occupied and unoccupied nests, which means that the contrast between the two should be made in the paragraph. I find both mentioned at the very end of the paragraph. While this contest over an unoccupied nest site produced no obvious mortality, fights over occupied nests sometimes kill over 1,000 bees in a single battle. So fights over unoccupied nest sites don't kill any bees, while fights over occupied nests kill a lot of bees. Now, I go back to the answer choices and find that A is the correct answer. They are more violent than battles over unoccupied nest sites. Again, this strategy saves you a lot of time and allows you to get to the right answer without too much effort. The next question is one of my favorites. It's the insert text question. It asks you to find the place in the paragraph where you can insert a sentence. Again, what I see students doing with this question is trying to really understand the text. As a result, they waste time and make a lot of mistakes. However, there are a few tricks that can help you answer this question quickly and correctly. Very often, your English level is more than sufficient to score high on the TOEFL reading section. The problem is that you either don't know the strategies for different question types, or you don't apply them correctly. Here is a recent example from one of my 101 students. He has a pretty good level of English, but he kept scoring 18 or 19 on reading. We had a few sessions where we analyzed the questions together, and I showed him the little details he should be watching for in the reading section. As a result, his last TOEFL reading score was 26. His level of English did not actually improve that much. It was his approach to taking the reading test that changed. He learned how to manage his time effectively and figured out what information to focus on and what to skip. That's all. In fact, the TOEFL reading section is quite simple and straightforward. And it's a shame that so many students lose time simply because they're working on the wrong things. I'm going to leave the link to the course below, so if you're struggling with the TOEFL reading section, feel free to check it out. Back to our question. We already analyzed this paragraph when answering the previous one. This is another example of why it's important to approach the questions in the same order in which they're given on test day. First, it says that Hubble and Johnson recognized that the availability of nest sites could affect distributions. Then, it mentions that one of their steps was to map the distributions of trees suitable for nesting. They found one thing, and then they found another thing. And then we have the question. What did these measurements show the researchers? Finally, there is a conclusion. If you remember, I mentioned that the information in the text usually goes from more general to more specific, which helps us a lot with this question type. The first sentence says, they recognized that the availability of potential nest sites for colonies could also affect distributions. This is general information. If we put our sentence in gap A, we'll give an example or more specific information about the same distribution. For example, a clumped distribution of nests might simply reflect a clumped distribution of suitable nesting sites. We are illustrating Hubble and Johnson's hypothesis, so the correct answer is A. Look at the gaps B, C, and D. We can't really put our sentence there because they are all so well connected. We are given an experiment, then the findings, one by one. Then a question is asked based on those findings. So the only option we have here is A. Finally, the last question is the prose summary question. For this question, however, I'd like to do a little test. I'm not going to take the question from the text we just analyzed. Instead, I'll show you a summary question that belongs to a completely different text. Why would I do that? To show that you shouldn't rely too much on the text, and that you can figure out the right answers even without reading it. The introductory statement says, in moving from water to land, ancestral plants overcame many obstacles to survive. So, even without reading the text, I know that I need to find examples of how ancestral plants or ancient plants overcame obstacles or difficulties to survive. So I'm expecting to find some examples of how they tried to survive. Think of Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant. If you think about the movie and what his character had to go through to stay alive, you'll come up with some examples. How he had to crawl through the icy forest, how he had to find food, and so on. The same thing should be done here. Let's analyze the answer options. Take some time to study them first, and think about the options you choose yourself. I'd go with B, D, and E. Why? Well, C is too general. It looks like a sentence that would be written in the first paragraph just to introduce some information. Avoid options that are too general. You'll usually have at least one sentence like this. A is too specific. It's not about algae in general. It's about brown and red algae and pigmentation. There is too much detail, and it's hard to understand this statement without context. Too detailed, so let's eliminate it. The first thing you should always do is eliminate overly general and overly specific options. Now, F might have been a tempting option to choose, but it's not relevant to our introductory statement. The introductory statement tells us to find examples of how plants overcame difficulties, not what happened after. F says, once plants had overcome the challenges posed by terrestrial life, they prospered by becoming less diverse. So it focuses on the outcomes, not the challenges. Going back to The Revenant, it's more about what happened to the protagonist after he got to the village, not what kind of struggles he had to endure along the way. So I'm left with E, B, and D. These options tell me about different adaptations that plants had to go through. In this video, we're going to analyze a TOEFL reading passage and check whether you know all the strategies and techniques needed to tackle TOEFL reading. So if you find this section of the test difficult or can't get the score you need, keep watching. If you want to increase your score in a quick and effective way, click the link below to join our TOEFL course. The first question is the vocabulary question. It says, the word eventually in the passage is closest in meaning to. Then you need to choose which of the four options is the most similar in meaning. Eventually means in the end. So option C is the correct answer. This word is very common in TOEFL reading passages, and you'll come across it frequently. So in case you don't know it, make sure to write it down. Now, question 2 is the inference question. It says, paragraph 1 supports which of the following inferences about the North American Southwest? For inference questions, you need to read the paragraph and draw a conclusion based on it. In this question, I need to make an inference about the North American Southwest. Since the paragraph isn't very long, I would read it first. If the paragraph is longer, you can quickly skim the answer options before reading it. As I read, I try to break the text into a few short and easy to understand ideas. Pause the video now to try answering on your own first, then watch my explanation. I see that hunter-gatherers arrived, and after their arrival, several types of agriculture emerged. Emerged means appeared. Again, if you don't know this word, be sure to write it down. These types of agriculture addressed one main problem: the Southwest's fundamental problem. Fundamental means main. The problem was how to obtain enough water to grow crops. Why was it a problem? Because the environment isn't ideal for agriculture, as rainfall is low and unpredictable. As a result, little or no farming is practiced there today. Then, we see that people experimented with alternative strategies in different locations for a long time. And many of these experiments were successful for centuries. But eventually, all of them succumbed to environmental problems. What is the meaning of the word succumb? To succumb means to fail to resist pressure, to give in, or to be overwhelmed by a negative force. So basically, they all failed, except one. Let's look at the answer options. A. Its sources of water were plentiful when the hunter-gatherers first arrived. No, we just read that their main problem was how to obtain enough water to grow crops. B. It has always lacked the large population needed to perform successful experiments in agriculture. There is no mention of the population, so B is incorrect. C. Its climatic conditions today are essentially similar to those existing when the hunter-gatherers first arrived. Now, the paragraph says, all involving different solutions to the Southwest's fundamental problem. Fundamental problem: how to obtain enough water to grow crops in an environment where rainfall is so low and unpredictable that little or no farming is practiced there today. This shows that the climatic conditions now are similar to those when the hunter-gatherers first arrived. So C is the correct answer. Now D, it was more seriously affected by climate change than it was by human impact, is incorrect. There is no comparison made between climate change and human impact. the paragraph only mentions human impact or climate change at the end, but doesn't compare them. So C is the correct answer. If you start by reading the answer options, then read the text, then go back to the answer options, you'll waste a lot of time. Also, if you focus too much on the keywords, you might miss option C because it doesn't contain enough keywords from the text. So for this question, focus on the ideas, not the keywords. Now, question 3 is the negative factual information question. It's the one where you see the word except, which means you need to find the option that is not correct based on the text. The question says, all of the following are mentioned in paragraph 2 as potential problems faced by the Hohokam except. Now, for this question, I suggest you read the answer options first. A. Insufficient rainfall to allow crops to grow. B. Rainstorms leading to destructive water runoff. C. Insufficient workers to dig ditches and canals. And D. Irrigation water levels in channels too low to be used. So we have insufficient rainfall, rainstorms, insufficient workers, irrigation water levels that are too low. Now, with these options in mind, I go back to the text and look for the potential problems faced by the Hohokam. I can see that one strategy was to live at higher elevations, where rainfall was higher. But that carried a risk because higher elevations are cooler than lower elevations. And in an especially cool year, it might be too cold to grow crops at all. An opposite extreme was to farm at the warmer, low elevations. But there the rainfall is insufficient, even for dry land agriculture. The Hohokam got around that problem by constructing the most extreme irrigation system in the Americas outside Peru. But irrigation entailed the risk that human digging of ditches and canals could lead to sudden heavy water runoff from rainstorms, digging further down into the ditches and canals, and carving out deep channels. So in that case, the water level would drop below the field level, making irrigation impossible for people without pumps. Now let's check the answer choices. A. Insufficient rainfall to allow crops to grow. Mentioned in the middle of the paragraph. The text says, the rainfall is insufficient even for dry land agriculture. B. Rainstorms leading to destructive water runoff. Mentioned closer to the end of the paragraph. Irrigation entails the risk that human digging of ditches and canals could lead to sudden heavy water runoff from rainstorms, which means that rainstorms could lead to destructive water runoff. D. Irrigation water levels in channels too low to be used. Mentioned in the last sentence. The water level would drop below the field level, making irrigation impossible for people without pumps. But what about option C? Insufficient workers to dig ditches and canals. Now, this sentence contains many keywords from the paragraph, but it's actually incorrect, which makes it the correct answer. Why? We do have a mention of workers digging ditches and canals, but there is no indication that there were not enough of them. So C is the answer. Always remember that the correct answer is the one that is incorrect based on the text. Great job. The next question is another vocabulary question. It's about the word initially. We know that initially means at first. So A, first, is correct. Let's move on to question 5. It's one more vocabulary question. I love these practice tests because they provide more questions, especially more vocabulary questions, which is great for testing your vocabulary. By the way, in case you've been wondering, this test comes from the Wakeshoe website. If you prefer apps or find the Chinese on the Wakeshoe website a bit confusing, you can practice with the LinguaTOEFL app. There, you can select the question types that are most challenging for you and focus on them until you master them. Then move on to the practice tests. Now back to the question. The word adjacent in the passage is closest in meaning to neighboring, higher, unused, additional. An adjacent room is the room next door. So adjacent refers to something that is neighboring. That's why A is correct. That's the end of today's video. Thanks for watching. If you are currently preparing for the test and want to check how ready you are, click here to get your writing and speaking scored. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more tips and tricks on how to ace the TOEFL test. And remember, scoring 100 plus on the TOEFL isn't rocket science. It's the little things you do that make all the difference. As always, I wish you all a stellar TOEFL score. Until next time, bye-bye.